Good morning, people. It's Saturday morning. I'm here with the Squirtle, looking all Christmassy again. I'm going to flick it round. Looking all Christmassy again. A wave. And she's got her father, not Father Christmas. That's not Father Christmas at all, is it? It's Minnie Mouse saying Merry Christmas. Because it's getting to the end of November now when we really are approaching Christmas now. We got one Christmas tree up and the robin is flying high today. So there is Santa Claus, and there's the robin flying high. We've got our hot chocolates, Molly's usual, and my usual. My one looks a little bit better today. Mine normally looks fairly skanky. So we got some lovely books today. As the weeks go by, getting more and more Christmassy. So we're getting into the real Christmassy ones now. We're going to start today with, we've had over the last couple of weeks, we've had two Richard Curtis books, or Richard Curtis and illustrations with Rebecca Cobb. So this one is the third one, called The Empty Stocking. It's the first one they did together. Really just funny and sweet and lovely. Richard Curtis is Mr. Love Actually and Vicar of Dibley and Four Weddings and a Funeral, Notting Hill and all that. We've got a couple of classics here. Obviously, The Polar Express. Most of you will be familiar with the film of The Polar Express. Started off as a book by Chris Van Allsburg. This is the book of I'm always impressed when people when they can do a whole film of what a relatively short book. Be like The Grinch, because The Grinch isn't that long. But we watched that this morning. Yeah, Molly wasn't feeling very well this morning, so we were up at about 6 o'clock, something like that. Oh, we were going to bring that Christmas tree down, weren't we? We'll bring it down tomorrow. So Molly was up doing some crafting. So after we watched The Grinch at about 6 o'clock this morning, you were doing some crafting. So we'll bring that down tomorrow and show a rather wonderful Christmas tree you've done. So Polar Express, but we're also doing The Snowman, and we're going to follow up that tomorrow with The Snowman and the Snow Dog. That's going to be one of tomorrow's choices. And finally, we've had a couple of Mick Ink Pen books. I don't know whether we've ever done a Zoe and Beans before, no. But kind of Mick Ink Pen and his daughter Chloe. There's been a few Zoe and Beans books, and this is Zoe's Christmas list. So Mick Ink Pen does the pictures, and I think Chloe does the words. But Zoe's Christmas list. So we're going to start with, as I said last week, we're going to sort of do like one long one and then several short ones. So this is today's long one. And then in the week, I'm holding on to a few so in the week run up to Christmas, we perhaps do one a night, just one story, but one longer story. So this is The Empty Stocking, and if you ever get the audiobook of this has got Dawn French reading it, and she does a really good job of reading it. So, it was Christmas night, and Mr. and Mrs. Weston were excited, as were their twins, Sam and Charlie, who were, despite their names, both girls. Sam was Samantha, and Charlie was Charlotte, but they were never called those names. They were always called Sam and Charlie. They were also always twins, both having been born on June the 21st, Midsummer's Day, 7 years before. So they're 7 years old. But their birthday was not the only thing about them that was the same. They also looked exactly the same, although people, of course, really loved them. People who really loved them could completely see the difference. Sam always wore her hair in pretty plaits, and Charlie had a little scar on her cheek in the shape of a fork. But actually, as children, they couldn't be more different. And on Christmas night, that was a serious worry, because Sam was always very well behaved, and Charlie was, well, not to mince words, because this is basically what this story is all about, Charlie was quite bad. Not really bad, but, very naughty. Not interested in being obedient, quite often very grumpy, not very fond of telling the complete truth, but very fond of eating sweets, making a filthy racket, and having too much fun. parents, of course, still loved her to bits, loved her as much as Sam because that's what parents do. But for instance, her teachers found her very annoying because she was particularly naughty at school, and her next door neighbours hated her because she was very naughty at home, and shopkeepers didn't like her one bit because she ate a lot of their sweets and very rarely paid for them. Anyway, it was Christmas night, and as usual the family watched Elf, which was just great. Then Dad read them The Night Before Christmas, which was very good, and How the Grinch Stole Christmas, which was even better. Then Mum sat at the piano and made them all sing Santa Claus is Coming to Town, and as always, when they got to the bit about Santa knowing whether you'd been good or bad, everybody couldn't help looking for just a moment in Charlie's direction, because this was a worry. There was no way Santa wouldn't know what Charlie had been up to this year. But just as usual, when it got late, the children put out their stockings at the end of their beds and left a mince pie, a tangerine and a glass of port for Santa by the chimney, and then headed off very excited to bed. And Charlie said to her dad, "Daddy, do you think Santa will bring me anything this year?" And her dad said, "Yes, of course he will, my darling." But there's no denying it, he was a little bit worried because this really had been Charlie's naughtiest year yet. And what with the eating a whole box of chocolates incident, and the glue in the DVD episode, and the ice down the back of the teacher's dress moment, and the worst things, then Mum and Dad went upstairs to a bed pretty early too, because they'd heard a story about a mum and dad who'd stayed up late and actually bumped into Santa Claus on the stairs, and Santa Claus had scarpered and they'd had to quickly fill stockings for their kids themselves to make up for Santa's hasty exit. So at 11:10 they got into their pyjamas, turned off their lights, and even though they whispered till midnight, at least they knew that Santa could get on with his job undisturbed. And of course, that's exactly what Santa did. At about 1:15 in the morning he arrived in England from Spain in a very good mood because he was getting quite near home. He moved up swiftly from Kent, rushed through London and sped on to Suffolk, where good Sam and naughty Charlie lived. He landed in the garden, placed the hungry reindeer near a tasty hedge. By the way, look out for that next year if you've got a garden. You'll normally find that a bit of it has been mightily munched on Christmas morning. And then headed down the chimney into the living room. Dusting himself off, he crept past Mum and Dad's door and into the room where the twins slept. And there he filled one stocking. And then left the other one completely empty, because Charlie had indeed been very bad that year. He never liked doing it, but sometimes Santa has to get tough, and this year in Charlie and Sam's room was one of those get tough times. He then left their room quickly, drank a bit of port, gobbled the whole tangerine and the pie, swooshed up the chimney and headed on, and left the house totally still. Mum and Dad had no idea of the terrible thing that had just happened, and neither did Sam or Charlie. One stocking hung light and empty, and the other swung with the weight of all the wonderful presents, and for 3 hours nothing moved. Not even a mouse, or a fox, or an owl, or a badger. Where's the owl? There's the owl. Badger, fox, mouse. And then, just by chance, as fate would have it, at 4 in the morning, naughty Charlie woke up and looked down at the end of the bed and saw a gorgeous full stocking. Because, you see, Santa hadn't looked very carefully, and when Charlie and Sam were sleeping, you couldn't see Sam's plaits, and you couldn't see the scar on Charlie's cheek, so they looked exactly and completely and utterly the same, with disastrous results. Charlie was thrilled about the stocking, and because she was quite naughty, she decided that she would go and sneak a peek at all her presents before everyone else woke up. But as she went down the bed, she looked across at her sister's bed and saw the empty stocking. And she stopped dead, and she just sat there and thought very hard with a big frown. Because no one had ever really bothered to notice, but amongst all her naughtiness, Charlie really, really loved her sister. And sometimes the actual reason she was naughty was because she loved making Sam happy. And sometimes when she was really naughty, it was because she loved making Sam laugh. And sometimes when she was really, really naughty, it was because other people had been picking on Sam, and Charlie was certainly not having that. And then Charlie thought about her sweet sister's face in the morning, when she'd reach for her stocking, all excited about the toys and sweets and games she'd find inside, and she would find nothing in it at all. She thought about how Sam would try to behave, to be brave, and how Sam's chin would start to wobble, and she thought about how she felt whenever Sam was sad. Not sad because Charlie had just sat on her, but really properly in her heart sad. But then, very, very, very quietly, so she didn't wake up Sam, naughty Charlie started to move presents from her full stocking into Sam's empty one, present by present, one after the other, in a totally mathematical manner. Even if she really liked something, until both stockings were half full, with exactly the same number of presents, because half was a lot better than nothing. And when she'd made completely sure each stocking was the same, Charlie breathed a sigh of relief and went back up to her bed and back to sleep. And everything went quiet again. At home, but not, as it turns out, on Santa's sleigh, because Santa was getting near the North Pole when suddenly something very unexpected happened. A light started to flash on his good badometer, the machine that told him which children had been good and which other ones had been bad. And Santa looked very surprised indeed, because this had never happened before. There'd been a last-minute change. 45 minutes later, a very exhausted fat old man with a beard landed on a lawn in Suffolk with a very munched hedge. And a minute later he was on the stairs again, creeping towards the twins' room. And when he popped his head into the room, he saw the two half-filled stockings, and he smiled. And then swiftly, because it was getting very close to the time that children started to wake up, he filled up both stockings to the brim and crept back down the stairs. But just as he put his head in the chimney, he had one last thought and headed back up the stairs.
Why is the TV down?
Where?
Not the TV, I mean the tree.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That is a good point. Yeah, I have no idea why the tree is down. Has Charlie been naughty there? I don't know. Don't remember the tree coming down. Good point. Not spotted that. So he headed back up the stairs one last time and popped one last little thing into Charlie's stocking. 5 minutes later, Santa flew away in the highest of spirits, and indeed, just like he used to in the old days, he hollered out for all to hear, "Happy Christmas, and to all a good night," which actually woke up good Sam, who looked down her bed and saw a completely full stocking, just as she expected. Then she looked across at naughty Charlie's bed, a little bit worried, but she saw, thank heavens, that her sister's stocking was completely full as well. So she woke Charlie, who, for some reason Sam could never explain, looked very shocked indeed by their two full stockings. "I suppose," Sam said to her mum later, "it must be because Charlie didn't expect to get any presents at all this year." Then Sam and Charlie both rushed into Mum and Dad's room and opened up all their presents one after another, and everyone was very happy indeed. But when the stockings were completely empty, Charlie happened to put her hand in just one more time, just to check. And she was surprised to find a small, bright badge that looked a bit like Rudolph's nose. She never showed it to anyone because she was a bit embarrassed about it, but she always kept it because secretly she was very proud of it. And secretly, although she knew she was sometimes very naughty indeed, she also thought it might be true. It just said 2 words: "Good girl." And that's it. Like that story. Like that story. You would never be like naughty Charlie, would you? No. Right. Do I need to hold that a second so you can have a little slurp of hot chocolate? I put a little bit of milk in it, so hopefully is it kind of good enough to drink now? Yeah. Good. Good. A little bit of hot chocolate from you. Right. Next one is Should we do Zoe and Beans next and then have the two
Yeah.
snowman and whatever? Zoe and Beans, Zoe's Christmas list. This is nice. We like this. Oh, we had Pants on the Moon. I think we had Pants on the Moon at one point. Zoe decided that this year she didn't want Father Christmas to surprise her with a present. So she made a list. Zoe's list had only one thing on it. She knew exactly what she wanted. Kylie curls. Which is a doll, isn't it, I think? Zoe decided to go to the Arctic and stick her Christmas list to the North Pole, where Father Christmas would be sure to find it. So she packed her things. Chocky bears for Beans, some juice, 2 ham sandwiches, 2 jam sandwiches, a scarf, mittens, some sticky tape, and her Christmas list. It was a very long way to the North Pole, and they went on buses and trains and boats and planes. But there were no buses or trains or boats or planes that went all the way there. So Zoe climbed on Beans's back and he swam. Blimey, that's going to be cold. Soon little icebergs began to float past, then bigger ones and bigger still. "We're nearly there," said Zoe, and a baby polar bear floated by. He seemed lost. "Come with us," said Zoe. So the little bear climbed on Beans's back and Zoe fed him chocky bears while she told him all about Kylie curls and her Christmas list. "We're going to the North Pole," said Zoe. "Woof," said Beans as his feet touched land. But he was grateful for that. The Arctic was a wonderful place to whiz downhill on a lunchbox. Whee! Whee! So that is what they did over and over again. Whee! Crash! "We'd better get going," said Zoe. "It's beginning to snow." The North Pole was further than it looked, and by the time they arrived, the wind was sending snowflakes spinning round their ears. That's the North Pole. Who knew it was? It's very tricky sticking something with sticky tape in the middle of a snowstorm wearing mittens. And did you know that when sticky tape gets wet, it loses all of its stick and comes undone? Oh no, no Kylie curls for Christmas. "Let's go home," said Zoe. But the blizzard blew itself into their faces, and soon they lost their way in the deepening snow. Zoe put one of her mittens on Beans's nose to keep it warm, and sang a song about a red-nosed rain dog to cheer herself up. But the wind just blew harder, and night began to fall. As it grew dark, the ground seemed to shake, the land began to rumble, and great creaks and groans filled the air, and the ice beneath their feet seemed to move. Creak, creak, crack. As the blizzard howled round them, they curled up together in the snow and fell fast asleep. And in the morning, Zoe and Beans found themselves floating out to sea on their very own iceberg. But the storm was gone, and so was the little bear. "Little bear, little bear," called Zoe. "Look, there he is. Swim, little bear, swim." Oh, it's hard to get in. "Fetch him, Beans." So Beans jumps in. Splish, splash, splish, splash. "Hello, little bear." And at this moment that Zoe realised that she wasn't really all that bothered about Kylie curls. Put that in properly. Yeah, so that was that. So hello, little bear. So yeah. I put that back in right now. I haven't. Sorry, everybody at home. That's it. "Ham or jam?" said Zoe, and the little bear took both. As they floated away, the northern lights came out to play. "We'll be home soon," said Zoe, "but for now, let's have some fun." They're on the lunchbox, are they? The little bear pointed up at the sky. "Look, Beans," said Zoe, "it must be Christmas Eve." As they waved to Father Christmas, Zoe decided that perhaps it was best after all to let him surprise her with a present. "I wonder what it'll be," she thought. It's only a Kylie Curls special edition. Kylie Curls and Curly Carl. So that's like Barbie and Ken. Zoe. She's being kind and nice. She gets 2 dolls. Right, the snowman. The classic film by Raymond Briggs. The snow fell all night long, and when James woke up, he couldn't believe his eyes. He leapt out of bed and rushed to the window. Outside, the world had turned a brilliant, glistening white. Quickly, he tugged on his clothes and ran downstairs. "Don't forget your boots," Mum said. James had never seen so much snow. He played for hours, stamping up and down the garden. Then he started to roll a snowball, and it got bigger and bigger. And soon it was so big that it gave James a brilliant idea. He would make a snowman. Carefully he built the body, then rolled another ball for the head. James ran inside and found a tangerine for the nose, 2 pieces of coal for eyes, an old green hat and a matching scarf. Last of all, James gave his snowman a great big smile. He was perfect. "Time for dinner," Dad called. All evening, James sat by the window so that he could gaze at his wonderful snowman. And he would have stayed there all night, but it was soon time for bed. As he brushed his teeth, James took one last look at his snowman. He snuggled down in bed. "I hope he's still there in the morning," he thought, and he drifted off to sleep. In the middle of the night, James woke up and he remembered his snowman. He crept downstairs and he looked out at his snowman. But the most magical thing happened. He turns round. The snowman came to life. James shook the snowman's hand. "Come in," he said. "I'll show you around." "In here," whispered James, opening the living room door. The snowman loved the Christmas tree, but thought the fire was too hot. So James took him to the fridge to cool down. Then they explored the rest of the house and even tiptoed into Mum and Dad's room and tried on Dad's clothes. "Perhaps we'd better go back outside," said James. And when they reached the garden, the snowman grabbed James's hand and started to run. Faster and faster until they were flying. That's when they get the "we're walking in the air" bit in the film. From all around, they were joined by flying snowmen. Together they flew over the city, out to sea and on and on. Until at last they landed at the North Pole. The snowman led James through the trees towards a clearing. James couldn't believe his eyes. A large circle of snowmen were gathered, and in the middle there was Father Christmas. "Just in time," smiled Father Christmas. "The party's about to start." And what a party it was. James and the snowman danced all night long. And as the first rays of sunlight appeared over the hills, Father Christmas handed James a parcel. "For me?" James gasped. It was a soft blue scarf, beautifully decorated with snowmen. "Oh, thank you," cried James. He gave Father Christmas a big hug, and then it was time to go. James and the snowman soared into the air and flew towards home. When they arrived, it was nearly morning and time for James to go back to bed. James didn't want to leave his friend, but he knew it was time to say goodbye. And with one last look at the snowman, James went inside and upstairs to bed. Happy and exhausted, he fell asleep. In the morning, James' first thought was of the snowman. He jumped out of bed and raced down the stairs, past Mum and Dad, out of the door and into the garden. But the snowman had gone. It had melted. But as luck would have it, I think the snowman might be back tomorrow in tomorrow's stories. That is lovely, isn't it? You forget when you don't read these. with it. How lovely that story is. Right, final one of the day. Do you need a slurp of hot chocolate?
No.
Okay. The Polar Express. First time I ever saw the film of this, it was in 3D, and it's wonderful. Right. On Christmas Eve, many years ago, I lay quietly in my bed. I didn't rustle the sheets. I breathed slowly and silently. I was listening for a sound a friend had told me I'd never hear. The ringing bells of Santa's sleigh. There is no Santa, my friend had insisted, but I knew he was wrong. Late that night I did hear sounds, though not of ringing bells. From outside came the sounds of hissing steam and squeaking metal. I looked through my window and saw a train standing perfectly still in front of my house. It was wrapped in an apron of steam. Snowflakes fell lightly around it, and a conductor stood at the open door of one of the cars. He took a large pocket watch from his vest, then looked up at my window and I put on my slippers and robe. I tiptoed downstairs and out of the door. "All aboard!" the conductor cried out. I ran up to him. "Well," he said, "you coming?" "Where?" I asked. "Why, to the North Pole, of course," was his answer. "This is the Polar Express." I took his outstretched hand and he pulled me aboard. The train was filled with other children, all in their pyjamas and nightgowns. We sang Christmas carols and ate candies with nugget centres as white as snow. We drank hot cocoa as thick and rich as melted chocolate bars. And outside, the lights of towns and villages flickered in the distance as the Polar Express raced northward. That's the scene, that's the hot chocolate, that one. Soon there were no more lights to be seen. We travelled through cold, dark forests where lean wolves roamed and white-tailed rabbits hid from our train as it thundered through the quiet wilderness. We climbed mountains so high it seemed as if we would scrape the moon, but the Polar Express never slowed down. Faster and faster we ran along, rolling over peaks and through valleys like a car on a roller coaster. It feels like a roller coaster when you're watching it, doesn't it? The mountains turned into hills, and the hills turned to snow-covered plains. We crossed a barren desert of ice, the great polar ice cap. Lights appeared in the distance, and they looked like the lights of a strange ocean liner sailing on a frozen sea. "There," said the conductor, "is the North Pole." The North Pole. It was a huge city standing alone at the top of the world, filled with factories where every Christmas toy was made. At first we saw no elves. "They're gathering at the centre of the city," the conductor told us. "That is where Santa will give the first gift of Christmas." "Who receives the first gift?" we all asked. The conductor answered, "He will choose one of you." "Look!" shouted one of the children. "The elves!" Outside we saw hundreds of elves. As our train drew closer to the centre of the North Pole, we slowed to a crawl. So crowded were the streets with Santa's helpers. When the Polar Express could go no farther, we stopped and the conductor led us outside. We pressed through the crowd to the edge of a large open circle. In front of us stood Santa's sleigh. The reindeer were excited. They pranced and paced, ringing their silver sleigh bells that hung from their harnesses. It was a magical sound, like nothing I'd ever heard. Across the circle, the elves moved apart and Santa Claus appeared. The elves cheered wildly. He marched over to us and pointed to me, said, "Let's have this fellow here." And he jumped into his sleigh. The conductor handed me up and I sat on Santa's knee and he asked, "Now, what would you like for Christmas?" I knew that I could have any gift I could imagine, but the thing I wanted most for Christmas was not inside Santa's giant bag. What I wanted more than anything was one silver bell from Santa's sleigh. And when I asked, Santa smiled. Then he gave me a hug and told an elf to cut a bell from a reindeer's harness. The elf tossed it up to Santa. He stood holding the bell high above him and called out, "The first gift of Christmas!" A clock struck midnight as the elves roared their approval. Santa handed the bell to me and I put it in my bathrobe pocket. The conductor helped me down from the sleigh. Santa shouted out the reindeers' names and cracked his whip. His team charged forward and climbed into the air. Santa circled above us, then disappeared into the cold, dark polar sky. As soon as we were back inside the Polar Express, the other children asked to see the bell. I reached into my pocket, but the only thing I felt was a hole. I'd lost the silver bell from Santa Claus's sleigh. "Let's hurry outside and look for it," one of the children said. But the train gave a sudden lurch and started moving. We were on our way home. Oh dear. It broke my heart to lose the bell. When the train reached my house, I sadly left the other children. I stood at my doorway and waved goodbye. The conductor said something from the moving train, but I couldn't hear him. "What?" I yelled out. He cupped his hands around his mouth. "Merry Christmas," he shouted. The Polar Express let out a loud blast from its whistle and sped away. On Christmas morning, my little sister Sarah and I opened our presents. When it looked as if everything had been unwrapped, Sarah found one last small box behind the tree, and it had my name on it. Inside was the silver bell, and there was a note. "Found this on my seat of my sleigh. Fix that hole in your pocket. Signed, Mr. C." I shook the bell. It made the most beautiful sound my sister and I had ever heard, but my mother said, "Oh, that's too bad." "Yes," said my father, "it's broken." When I'd shaken the bell, my parents had not heard a sound. At one time, most of my friends could hear the bell, but as the years passed, it fell silent for all of them. Even Sarah found one Christmas that she could no longer hear its sweet sound. Though I've grown old, the bell still rings for me, as it does for all who truly believe. The Polar Express. Right, I need my hot chocolate now, because it's a bit cold. I am wearing a ridiculously short-sleeved shirt in this cold weather. So what jobs have we got today? I've got to pop back to the Tithe Barn. I've got to... I don't know if you come as well if you want. Depends how you feel. I've got to pop some things over to Nanny and Grandpa. What other jobs we got?
Not much. No, I don't think so.
We're having a call with our friends next door later on.
Are we?
I call it the grown-ups, me and Mummy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I think Emily's found a film that she wants us to watch called Just My Luck for this evening. You probably want to watch I'm a Celebrity, don't you? It's sounding like Roman's in trouble for something. It sounds like he's fallen out with AJ. You're more up on it than me. I haven't really been watching it. So we will be back tomorrow. We've got, I'm trying to think what other books we've got. I know we've got The Snowman and the Snow Dog. Can you remember any of the other books? How to Catch Santa. That's one of them, I think.
Oh, yeah, I think so.
How to Catch Santa, Snowman and the Snow Dog. But the others will be a surprise. Can't remember. I know it's 5 of them. It's 5 shorties tomorrow.
Yeah.
Cool. So we will be back tomorrow. Hopefully Molly will be feeling even better. So we're going to drink our hot chocolate now and probably go for a bit of lunch because it is 1:45. I expect you're hungry. You hungry? Yeah. Cool. In which case we will see you tomorrow for more stories. Have a good Saturday.